The principle of scale refers to the size relationship between one thing and another. Scale is usually one of the first things that an artist has to consider when planning a work of art. Scale dictates the size of a canvas that an artist needs to stretch, or how much raw marble an artist will need to sculpt from. As humans, we experience scale in relation to our own size. We only perceive a 12-foot painting as being tall because we compare it to our own scale. For the same reason, we perceive a 2-foot painting as being small. In this way, scale is equally important to the artist, who has to physically construct a piece at a particular scale, as it is to the viewer, who has to then interpret the piece at that physical scale. The American pop artist Klaus Oldenburg has made a career out of addressing scale relationships in his work. Many of his early sewn vinyl sculptures were blown-up representations of smaller common objects. Oldenburg created large vinyl versions of everything from hamburgers to chocolate cake to cigarette butts. Some of Oldenburg's more recent work, like these large shuttlecocks installed in front of the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, were precisely constructed out of thick steel. They do well to make us look closer at something that we may perceive as either insignificant or mundane. Whenever we see a work of art in reproduction, the scale of that work is often skewed. Images of artworks are often shrunken down to fit into a book or onto a computer screen. Reproductions may also be blown up on a projection screen or on a billboard to be displayed at a distance. This painting, entitled "The Persistence of Memory" by the Spanish surrealist Salvador Dalí, is an iconic work that can be found in reproduction everywhere from calendars to t-shirts to coffee mugs. When we see an image so often, we tend to think of it on a grand scale. This painting must be huge if it's so important. Well, if that's the case, you may find the actual size of this painting quite surprising. In actuality, this painting is a mere 9.5 by 11 inches. As you can imagine, this size has a profoundly different impact on the viewer than if it were painted at a more monumental scale. In person, this piece has a surprising level of intimacy that seems to get lost in our usual perception of its scale. The lesson we can take from this example is that you always need to see an artwork in person if you want to truly experience it the way that the artist intended. In a work of art, the term format refers to the size and shape relationship of a picture plane. For example, the format of Dalí's painting would be one that is small and rectangular. He chose this particular format over, say, a large square format, or even a medium circular format, which is also known as a tondo. Images in a book are often limited to the small rectangular format of a page. Images on a billboard are blown up to the long rectangular format of the sign, and shows on your television screen are limited to the square format of the transmission. Where scale defines the size relationship between the viewer and the artwork, the principle of proportion defines the size relationships of parts to a whole within a work of art. Some proportional relationships that may be addressed include those of one figure in relation to another, a figure in relation to its surroundings, or even the parts of a figure in relation to its whole. This sculpture by the Italian Renaissance artist Michelangelo depicts the subject of the Pietà from Christian theology. This scene shows the dead body of Jesus being cradled by his mother Mary. In Michelangelo's depiction, the figure of Jesus is substantially smaller than that of Mary. Although Mary's drapery does well to conceal her actual size, if she were standing next to her life-size son, she would stand nearly 8 feet tall. This intentional use of unnatural proportion is called hierarchical scale. An artist uses hierarchical scale to show the relative importance of figures being depicted. In the case of the Pietà, Mary is intended to be the focal point. This part of the story is meant to showcase her loving, motherly instinct in such a moment of grief. The smaller size of Jesus reminds us of a child in his mother's arms. To reinforce the impact of hierarchical scale, let's compare Michelangelo's Pieta to one that was created in Poland nearly 100 years earlier. In this version, both figures are depicted with normal human proportions. Notice how the dynamics between the figures has changed. Where the Mary in Michelangelo's Pieta emits a calming sense of motherly grace, this Pieta creates a sense of visual tension as Mary seems to struggle under the cumbersome weight of a full-grown man.